Welcome, everyone. My name is Susan Davis, and I am the Professional Development Director for ATLAS, the Association of Technology Leaders in Independent Schools. And we are really thrilled today to have an exciting webinar for you on AI and machine learning with Vinny Vrotny, who is Director of Technology at the Kincaid School in Houston, Texas, and with Jim Bologna, who is Director of Technology and another long piece of his title. You can say that part at the Windward School in LA. What's the rest of your title, Jim?
I am the co-director of our Center for Teaching and Learning, and I'm also Dean of Science and Technology Outreach.
Oh my gosh, see, 3 titles.
There you go.
But we're really excited to hear from you. As you come in, we would love to have you tell us in the chat whether or not you'd like to be part of the panel. We have John, who has joined us from DC. We have a small group today, so we thought we might, make this a little bit more give and take as we go along with the presentation. But I'm going to turn it over to Vinny and Jim.
Great. Well, I'll get Jim to give Jim a chance to catch his breath. Just a bit.
Thank you.
I know that he was running across campus. And my name is, as Susan noted, is Vinny Vrotny. And one of the things that really I began to think about somewhat deeply, especially as it applies to school, was artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how that was beginning to creep into our schools in a number of different places. And so it was one of those things that I just, began to do some exploration, and some of the things that we'll talk about today. And because of similar interest, was connected with Jim, who also, this was a interest of his, and we ran a jam session at the ATLAS conference last year, which was very, very exciting and such. So Jim, you want to go ahead, and then I will, do you want to share the slide deck, Jim, or would you like me to?
I can,
a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally share. Let me push this.
So there, if you just run your cursor down to the bottom of the Zoom, yeah, there you go. You got it.
There we go. I also I dropped the links to this and our notes document to the chat. So those are available. But as Vinny was saying, we definitely found a similar simpatico interest here. Vinny had, I think, Vinny, you did the ISTE AI course.
Correct.
And I did
to give a little background, last year, ISTE, through a partnership with General Motors, ran a pilot course, which I was invited to take part in, and which I did. And it was an pure online course, which is now currently available. I think that it's $300 for non-members. To go through and learn about the educational implications of artificial intelligence. And, it really met with a lot of the readings that I was beginning to do as well, in addition to this particular course, and in some ways really freaked me out in terms of where AI and machine learning had crept into our schools.
Yeah, and at the same time, I have done, I did an MIT, or around the same time, I did an MIT course as well on artificial intelligence, and actually went this summer, based on Vinny's recommendation, to take a look at the ISTE course. I would highly recommend it, not just because it's an order of magnitude cheaper than the MIT course, but also because it's very much focused on education. And if this is at all something you're thinking about wanting to experiment with students with, one of these aspects, then it gives you a really great overview of some of the different components and what tools are out there that you can use to expose kids to some of these concepts and actually run labs and stuff. They're very self-contained pieces, so you can totally run them with a club if you've got a club worth of interest. But anyway, let me step back for a sec. This is the slide deck that I have here really just sort of talks about the different components of AI. And this particular one talks to, I haven't updated this since April, but this talks to how pervasive it is. It's really every major player in the industry is investing in AI. So you're seeing, you can definitely see Amazon, Google's probably bigger than that. But all of the players are trying to do it in various forms. And we're experiencing it now in a lot of different ways. It's sort of creeping its way in. And so AI, it's really about, it's about looking at models. That's sort of like the underlying core of AI. It has a lot of different branches, but each of the models allow it to take something that would be normally incredibly complex and really hard to do with simple programming, but you can use some advanced linear algebra and other pieces to create layers that allow these models to get built that will let the machine learn essentially from data sets. Mm-hmm. So and this is just, the difference between thinking about AI sort of broadly and then looking at a very specific piece of AI, which is most often what we encounter is like a narrow version of AI. So Siri is a narrow version of natural language processing AI. For its component. And these are the different like sort of big broad categories. People hear AI and the first thing they think about, it depends on your generation, I'm sure, but my generation, the first thing you think about is iRobot and from Isaac Asimov and like all these self-aware machines that are going to take over the world, and computer vision is a component of that. But the reality of artificial intelligence that we're more likely to encounter is machine learning or natural language processing. Cool. So examples of those tend to be more along the lines of the chatbot, perhaps that you're interacting with when you connect someplace, or when you call in for your cell company, and it says you can ask me something in regular English, and it's processing that component, and then it's trying to do some sort of translation with that, and then it's doing some sort of connection of learning, and then there are overlaps of those pieces that sort of delve into more components. So like the personalized learning or machine translation systems are where those intersections are happening. Mm-hmm. And then I alluded to this natural language processing. Hugely complex. Obviously, English is not easy for regular, English speakers to learn. So for a computer, it needs a lot of information to flow through. There's a lot of tools that are now becoming available to leverage this that are sort of free, but you're actually helping to train the system as it goes. I don't know if anybody's used Grammarly. Personally, I think it's a fantastic add-in that you can do. There's a paid version of it, but you can totally just use the free version to have it process through any of the text that you happen to have. And what you're really doing at that point is you're teaching it as well as it teaching you, because you're showing it your own structures that you're using. Okay, machine learning components. Yeah, basically I do some various overviews. I had talked about machine learning before, but reinforced learning is sort of taking that deeper. And so when we talk about deep machine learning, reinforcement learning adds in layers and additional sets of data. The more data you're giving it, the better it is at learning what it is. The more complex those interrelations are, the deeper the learning goes. And that's sort of like the time frame as we've arced across here in AI. So we get to the deep learning component of it. So that's sort of, those are sort of like the big picture pieces. Let me stop my share.
Yeah.
How's that, Vinny? Did I do okay?
That's great, and it's a great, kind of gives you a sense. And so, you know, as I started taking a look around our campus, you know, it kind of creeps in three different areas, in two specific areas. The first of which is the productivity tools. For those of you who are Google App Schools, you may notice that they now try to have their predictive word choicing on your emails. And again, you're training that particular language, and that's part of that natural language processing within that. And so, you know, one of the things that we as schools have to understand is that in many cases, we're the data, and we're the ones who are training these particular devices. Another example is one which may go in through your college counseling offices, which is College Kickstart. And College Kickstart is something that, you know, was running around, and a lot of the college counselors were very excited about. It would help build lists for students. And in taking a look at terms of service, what they didn't realize is that this particular application was learning their processes, and at some point in time might even get to a point where, you know, students now rely on these processes rather than the value add that our college counselors can offer within that arena. The third area is just in terms of education. How do we educate students to work within this? And then, you know, really, I talked about three, there's really a fourth. You know, do we bring devices in? So what is our policy on listening devices in the classroom? And I know that we had situations where teachers were bringing in Alexas and trying to connect them into our network, and knowing, especially as what has been shown, those are recording devices, and they're recording all of the information, whether you're directly speaking into those devices. So it's really about getting an understanding of what you're bringing in, and really beginning to have the conversations about what you might be giving away as part of that opportunity.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the comments here in our chat flow as it's going across, and Alexa definitely popped up. And there, Susan's question about like what do schools need to be aware of? I think that goes to Larry's point number 3. You know, his third point there, where what you want to do is you really want students and faculty, you need to train them, make them educated on the fact that these pieces have extensions that are beyond the casual use. Alexa, I know Alexa showed up in one of my offices, and it was an open office, and they wanted it because it was a super convenient way to allow anybody to control the music in the office. Sounds like, you know, it's simple enough, but it's not just a musical you know, it's not just playing music. It's not just controlling the music. There are all these other pieces. So I had to educate them on, you know, the whole office on, here's what's actually happening. Here's where your information is going off campus. Here, think about what else could be happening and what else goes on in this office that we might not want everybody to hear about. You know, that's the kind of continuing education you need to do at your school about all of these different pieces.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yes, they're absolutely going to get smaller, and they're going to, and I mean, really, they're in people's pockets right now. If you've got Siri turned on all the time, you know, then you're bringing it in. You know, a lot of schools have cell phone policies, but this seems like this is a natural extension of that kind of policy, because they tend to loosen as the kids get older. And if the kids are bringing it into the classroom, then, you know, this feels to me like that's a layer. You should ask that if they're going to bring it into class, that Siri is disabled unless there's a conversation with the teacher about a reason for it. I could see a natural translation, I know, maybe as an accommodation, but that should be known in advance.
But I'm also thinking about just, you know, as things get smaller and smaller, maybe even embedded in the backpacks, you know, how much are we really going to be able to control? And, you know, how much do people even know how to control, right? I mean, it's like you were talking about the music situation in the office. You know, sometimes people say, oh yeah, this is convenient, and they become aware, but they don't even know how to begin to control it.
I mean, it really goes, a lot of that goes into understanding and you know, fortunately or unfortunately, really becoming familiar with the privacy policy and data use policies for all of these various different services, and really beginning to take a deep dive. You know, I don't want to be the naysayer. I think that in particular applications that the AI is really beneficial, but you need to know what it is that you are dealing with coming in. So, you know, one of the areas, and I know that in through our HR, you know, they're using some of the various different services to begin to weed out various different applicants. Well, do we know how those algorithms have been built? And it's really questions with the developers so that, you know, you don't purposefully weed out women or weed out people of color based upon the criteria that we use. So it's really twofold: understanding how their algorithm works, but also what you can do to expand that algorithm, because oftentimes you're looking for keywords. And so do you have a wide enough range of keywords that you're not missing individuals because they don't meet the traditional criteria that the algorithms are building?
So to follow up on that, Vinny, is it possible for us to become kind of AI activists and train the machines in the way we want them to go?
I think that that's what we have to do. And just first off, having an awareness that these systems are working oftentimes in the background and sometimes without our knowledge. You know, we have to begin to ask the hard questions and really take a look at what it is that we want to do. Because again, in some instances, it's really good, and you have to understand what you may be trading off and really have that conversation at a very, you know, high level within your organization.
And I would also say you know, going back to that sort of to the privacy and security component of it, I mean, GDPR was a pretty big boost for us in terms of forcing a lot of the companies to be more, to be clearer with their privacy policies. You know, a lot of things have to now be in clear English. You have to talk about what you're doing with things. The company may or may not want to share the algorithm, but typically its use, you know, or side effects of the algorithm are going to become public as, you know, over time. And so being aware of that and how it links to the privacy policies that, you know, that are going to force them to be more transparent about this, I think is also a huge benefit.
Absolutely.
So Larry has asked, how do we know that the AI assumptions are good? You know, so it sounds like there are a couple of things going on. That we're talking about awareness first, right?
Correct.
Levels of awareness first, conscious choices about what you share and what you train, how you train the AI,
Correct.
right? But I'm thinking, and sort of this is related to what Larry has said, who's going to be the watchdogs, right? Well, you sort of suggested, Jim, that the public, I mean, it's going to, if there are abuses, it will be made known. People will know, and, you know, we need to stay on top of this. But, this is just adding one more layer of complexity to our lives about how do we monitor technology, right? And so who's going to do that, and who's going to do that for schools? Is that another thing that's going to fall on the technology directors?
I would say yes. The short answer to that, which is unfortunate, but we are the ones most well equipped to understand the complexity and and the ramifications of the news stories. Yeah, you'll hear a splash that will happen every once in a while about Alexa or Siri or what's happening with the data. Most people, maybe they'll concern, the threat level goes from like a 5 to a 4, just a tiny bit, but it doesn't register as to the bigger picture with that. Because there's also a trade-off for convenience, right? And that's one of those things that the stuff is becoming so helpful. How can you not want to do this? And that's okay, as long as you also understand what it is that which pieces of the store are you giving away when you're doing that.
Right.
The College Kickstart example is a fantastic one, because it was, that happened to us as well. It just showed up in our college counseling office, and they were super excited about it and started using it with the kids. And then we had to figure out like what was actually happening, what were we actually doing, and how did we want to turn on and off some of those models so we weren't sharing a ton of different things. And training, because that is the piece. As you use something, that's your information goes out. As the public uses whatever it is, that's bigger and bigger data sets. And those data sets are what really trains the AI models themselves. And that kind of goes to a point that Larry had mentioned as well about, that it's how do you know that the assumptions behind that are correct? And in many cases, there are certain assumptions that are built into the algorithm, but which you're not going to necessarily know until it starts misbehaving. But in a lot of cases, the algorithm is sort of, it's learning and growing, and that is a function of the data that it's given. And so this is sort of the obverse coin, where you actually want it to have more data, because the broader the data set, the less likely there will be specific bias. Doesn't mean that there won't be bias. It's just, the very specific bias will be lessened by the volume.
So yeah. What I would, I'm going to loop back to two different things. So to understand whether the algorithm is good, that's where we as individuals still have to be part of the process, right? We have to, if we get an outlier in terms of what's returned back to us, we have to question, why was that outlier given? Was it given because it was just something which was missed and is a really good choice for that particular individual, using the College Kickstarter as an example? Or is it because of the data that they had gotten in their data set and how it's been trained that piece was on in? So we need to be very vigilant in terms of making baby steps on into this, and make sure that we don't completely erase ourselves out of the processes. So in the terms of HR using the pieces, you may want to go back and take a look at things that didn't rise to the top, and begin to question why. Because there may be someone who may fit your needs and criteria, but they didn't jump up to the top. So we just, at this particular point, we can't just completely ignore those steps. We have to be part of the process. To answer your second question, does it fall on the director of technology? Most likely, but much like cybersecurity has really driven the need to have a security manager, we really, and this is something that we talked about a little bit at depth at our jam session, we really need to have an ethics officer, which is what a lot of organizations and businesses are developing, so that we can have them come in, because this really becomes a question of ethics in terms of what we share, what we're willing to share. And so, someone will have, in your campus will have to assume that role, whether it's your director of technology, whether it's someone else within your staff that begins to work within this.
Well, and what I'm struck by is the ever increasing need for the technology director to get out of the office and have deep conversations with every corner of the school,
Correct.
just to be on top of this, because the creep is going to happen. Things are going to creep in that you don't know about. You're not going to be included in planning or conversations when some decisions are made. And so building those relationships and being on the move throughout the school to have those conversations on a regular basis. We're going to have to, cloning will have to be needed at this point, where we need many of you to be many places at once. Robot versions of you, maybe, to be in many places at once. But, Larry has mentioned the whole IoT part of this.
Correct.
The Internet of Things, as it is creeping into just the daily functioning of the school, is huge.
Yeah. Being a director of technology is a much different animal than it was 10 years ago. And increasingly complex.
I would agree, and I think one of the tacks that you can take to to have those conversations is the security. Play the security chip. We're independent schools in particular. We are so focused on keeping our community safe and the information for our community safe that that you can. That's one way that you can bring that very clearly to your constituents. Like this, you should not have an Alexa because you don't know what else it's sharing. And given what's happening in your office, you could do this. Or given what's happening even in your classroom, you don't necessarily want chunks of information of conversations to flow out to the general. Yes, it's going to a training situation, but do we really trust that the storage place that Google or Amazon is using for those, or the people that are doing that, are actually securing that information either? So the first step is access, right? Every time you talk about security, don't give them access to that information. But if you are, be aware of the kind of information you're giving, and know how to turn it off if you need to.
Right.
Well, and
go ahead.
Go ahead, Vinny.
And we haven't even talked about how do we prepare students for living in a world in which this is going to be a major part of their lives, and how they augment themselves with these tools, and to have a baseline understanding of what these tools can do, so that they can leverage them for the positive. Because just like the introduction of technology into education back when I started my career, there's a lot of promise, and there's a lot of promise in the uses of the narrow AI and machine learning to really help us see new patterns, identify new things. But do we have to have a basic understanding of the process and how it works in order to be able to help understand? So
yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. It's definitely something that that our kids in our classrooms, and our own kids, will eventually just be using this. It's becoming part of the fabric of our society right now. So Vinny had mentioned, the Google helping you with your emails. And I think we've had a conversation about this in the past. Like, it's pretty good, and it's only been available for time measured in months. But it can pretty much guess what I'm likely to answer probably 60% of the time. That's scary, considering how little time I've spent doing any kind of training for it. I could easily foresee a time where our students don't even need to think as much about structuring an email. The email that's coming into them, if they're even replying an email, is likely to be 90% built by the AI that's built into the email system. So knowing that that's what's going to happen, we need to make sure that that kids understand, here's where each of these pieces for machine learning and natural language processing and all of the components, here's where they're starting to be layered in. Be aware of this as it extends in the future, because at a certain point it'll be much, much harder to distinguish where these pieces are.
Yeah, you have to develop a healthy skepticism.
Well, and I would add to that, there's a much publicized generational difference about attitudes towards privacy. And
Correct.
so, I would be thinking of working with students about what is your privacy tolerance, right? Where does the lever stop for you? What are you willing to have people know about you, and what are you not willing to have people know about you? And do all the systems that you interact with on a day-to-day basis reflect that?
Correct. Which is the promise of the GDPR, in that if you no longer are comfortable that you can pull your data, right? But that doesn't exist here yet. And so, I mean, it is one of those pieces is, how exposed is your data? How much are you willing to give up, and for what purpose? And having an understanding of what what they're doing with that data.
I have also heard that some of the legislature that is currently being worked on, they're trying to quantify that to a certain degree, so that what your data is worth. What is it worth to have your email address? Because realistically, if you're signing up for a free service, what you're giving them is what you're paying them. So there is a value that's there for this the end service, whatever that happens to be. And so, I think that will go, those next steps as we do whatever the next iterations of the US versions of GDPR are, those will help to sort of clarify that, I think, for the students. Because I agree, like right now, they don't even think about it. And as much as you may have an arc of digital citizenship in your own school, hopefully that touches everybody. Maybe it doesn't, but they're probably not continuing to think about that.
Or oftentimes, and I know that it's for us, you stop at a certain grade because that's the last time, and then it becomes elective based. But it's really at that same time that students are beginning to really delve into these areas without adult supervision. And so they may or may not understand all the implications and what they're giving away.
Or there could be a gap too. I know there's a lot of, when we first introduced this, we did really, really well in the middle school as the kids were starting to experiment. And then we sort of let them, we didn't really do much for the first couple of years after that, in 9, 10. And it wasn't till 11 that we started looping back and saying, hey, you should probably think about profiles for colleges as they do searches, stuff like that. And we were then we realized we really needed this whole arc that that went through the whole piece. But that's if you are not doing that and not introducing those concepts and not continuing to reinforce that, then I agree, the awareness will lessen considerably. And then when they do come back to it, they will think it is for a specific purpose as opposed to a more broad purpose. I like Larry had mentioned also about, besides ethics, also teaching computational thinking. Wholeheartedly agree with that. I'm not sure everybody would get on board with it, but I am for sure. I think that's a super helpful thing for anybody to understand what's actually happening with the pieces that you're using, or with the tech that you're using. How do you know that which decisions are being made? You don't have to really fully understand, nor are you likely to in the case of like deep learning. You're really not going to know what that algorithm is by the time it's developed. But if you at least understand that there is an algorithm in play, which then presupposes inputs and outputs, then you've at least got a leg up on it.
Yep. So, I think that Jim and I are really just beginning to talk about what's above the surface and just making people aware that, this is something which is emergent. I, I know that I don't know the depth of everything yet. I'm still learning.
Well, I would actually love to hear from John and from Larry about the ways in which you feel like you are intersecting with AI and machine learning as part of your roles as technology leaders in your schools. What's happening in your world?
For my purpose, just really watching the emerging space, just trying to learn as much as I can. That's why I'm here. The IoT thing came up because the Economist Quarterly this week, was going into that, which in depth, and the trillions of dollars going into that, which led to my Google searches about, okay, that's globally what's happening in education, but also a lot happening there in many of the different spheres we've been talking about today. So a huge intersection between IoT and AI coming down the pike. So it's really, the emerging space here. But really, I think it's so important for us as technology leaders to be looking at where the ball's going to be and quickly, because, the billions of dollars they're talking about is by 2023, and that's going to be here before we know it. So, they're putting that much money into this space. And it also dovetails, Susan and I attended a session at the end of ISTE last year that was about the AI, from a guy, he was from New Jersey, from the College Board, who gave that presentation. And, he was just saying, to not just look at the organization putting this stuff out, but take a look at, who's doing the research behind it. Are they tied to a university? Are those studies public? Are they continuing to be tied to that university? Really, to, even if we don't understand totally what's going on with it, do we understand that there's a lot of deep thought going on behind it and some good people behind it, who may well make mistakes, but that the right people are behind it. I think that would be important to see as all. So and then what's happening in our classes is one of our fabulous STEAM teachers is doing some AI and VR stuff, introductory stuff for his colleagues, who teach other subjects. And of course, we have kids doing some AI and VR coding projects at this time. So.
And I put into the chat, Larry mentioned the session that he and I both attended at ISTE, and the organization is called K-12 AI for K-12. It's missing. I'm going to have to retype that, but it's basically AI for K12.org. And this is just research from the National Science Foundation, but looking at, I'm looking at my little postcard here, which was right on my desk, which is basically looking at how it affects perception, representation and reasoning, learning, and then our natural interactions. So really good information there. John, what about you?
I'd say my interest falls in two broad categories. The first we've touched on already is digital citizenship, and how do we prepare students to survive in this surveillance economy? How do they manage their information flow, what they share, what they don't share? We've touched on that already. But then my big area of focus and wonderment is not so much IoTs or VR, AR, but how do we leverage the existing software infrastructure, the data we have about students, to more deeply understand how they learn, what their strengths and challenges are, and then how we actually maybe modify our curriculum to leverage that. So I guess I'm interested in that probably more than anything else, but I'm also aware that we have a mismatch between what AI wants and what we have. we have more snapshot demographic data, attendance data, test scores, things along those lines. And I think for AI to really be powerful, it needs a little more of a peek into your mental inbox. Jim mentioned the whole idea of the Gmail writing assistant. I think for AI to really flourish in my vision of a school world, we have to have more transitional or temporal data about students and what they do in between the test scores and in between the absences if AI is really going to be fruitful. So I do a lot of thinking about that.
I think it's really important to bring up the potential that we have there for improving learning. I think that's really important.
I agree. I think, one of the wonderful things about AI is the potential to truly personalize learning. Not everyone doing everything at their own pace, not the way many things are defined as personalized learning, but really truly personalized learning, so that people can learn in the way that works best for them. Because I think we're learning more and more as the research comes out that there are far many more learning styles than we could ever begin to comprehend. And I think we're going to get there, and AI can help us get there.
Absolutely. There's great promise in this area. I mean, one of the things that that Jim didn't share is, he's using a AI-driven tool for his network management and network monitoring through Darktrace. And so we're seeing more and more of these systems. I think that each of them has great promise, but again, we just need to have a healthy skepticism as we venture on into this and understand.
Yes, I would agree that yes, that's true. I did not mention that. It's one of the things that AI machine learning does really, really well is handle large volumes of data. And what has more data on your, at your school than your network, in terms of what's flowing back and forth through everything. So I found it to be a very useful application. And I think that, by extension, you can pull it into different areas. I think the more, besides, I really liked, actually, Larry, I loved what you were saying about, like, think about where the source is, where the research came from, who's involved with it. I jokingly put in the comments like about Wikipedia, but it's this, it's very similar. Like that startup company, if that startup company wasn't a spinoff from real solid research, and it came from a brilliant idea someplace, then what's the foundation for that? And is it the rough equivalent of that Wikipedia page that just got slapped together? Or is there real research that's in there that's continuing to develop? And how much of a human support component is there? So I think of like one of the adaptive tools that one of our math teacher uses is this tool called Alex, just not quite to the machine learning level where, but it is adaptive in that with some guidance from the teacher, you can have a student work through not just problem sets, but concepts, and they can move at a pace that gets tailored to them based on the system, but with some oversight from the faculty member. So the human component piece, I think, is pretty important, both from the guidance and effectiveness, but also looping all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, thinking about ethics and being very aware of what's happening as we go through it.
Well, I'm trying to, so maybe all four of you can help me pull together. We've kind of gone all over the map here,
I
but
just tried to pull it back for you.
yeah, well, you did, because I was taking notes. I would love to say, if we were going to make recommendations, if Atlas were going to make recommendations to schools, independent schools, about what do they need to be thinking about in the AI area. And I probably don't have all the bullets yet, as I was taking notes and just trying to pull this together. So I'm crowdsourcing my 4 great minds here today. First is to be aware, right? Be aware that it's out there, and where it is and how it is and what it works and how it works. But also be aware that you are an AI trainer with any kind of data that you share. And what is data? You know, people need to sort of rethink their ideas of what is the data. So you were talking about Grammarly. You know, the fact that it's analyzing how I write to learn better. That's data of a sort, right? And I think lots of times people don't even think down to that kind of a granular level.
Yeah. Can I qualify your be aware for?
Yes, please.
So and this is where this kind of goes back to our point about the director of technology person or the tech person being the be aware person. We are most used to algorithmic thinking, computational thinking, and so for us, as we look at tools that appear on our campus, if it's not immediately obvious to you how it works, there's probably an AI component to it. And so that's a good place to start yourself being aware of, what do I need to dig into the thing that is really useful, but you're not sure how exactly it's doing its thing. Then there's the bigger be aware, which is really the training component for your community.
And then so awareness, if we're looking at this level, there's awareness, asking questions, being out there and sort of aware of how it's seeping into your community. And then there's this decision-making part, right? The ethics, being more conscious of how you and others are making decisions about sharing information and being part of that. And then there's the student preparation part, that we need to be preparing students for. I think, John, you said a surveillance economy, and then ultimately there is, are we making the most of AI, considering the trade-offs for personalizing learning? Did I miss anything?
No.
Like, those are the 4 areas that we need independent schools to think about.
I would go beyond just the personalized learning, but how we then use AI to leverage some of our operational work as well. Because I think that there's some great opportunities. I mean, again, I brought up the issues around HR, but you just have to be aware, but it can be a great tool to help weed if you understand how it's weeding.
Right, and the main thing
we can gain
is
some efficiencies, and again, as schools, we're always looking to build efficiencies because we don't have the staff.
And I think that's a great idea, about the efficiencies. But I think we're also, it's sort of a little bit of a call to arms to say, if we do not become aware, it is likely not being used effectively for the good that we wish to use it for.
Correct. The human in the chain is essential in all of these steps.
Well, I think you guys have just solved the problem. No, I'm just kidding. This is just the beginning, obviously. I love this conversation with you all. I really would love to continue it at the Atlas level, and keep thinking about how we can begin to provide the kind of guidance that Atlas Schools needs. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Any last words from John and Larry?
This was terrific. So glad I was able to make it, and enjoyed learning from you guys. Thanks.
And we have a thank you from John as well.
And I would say, you know, if you're coming to this webinar afterwards to look at the video piece to it, you know, this has been a fantastic conversation. If you're brand new to this particular field, know that we're all like, this is all continuing to develop. So, you know, as much as we've dug into it, I still feel like I don't know a ton about what's going on. So, so don't worry if that's the way you feel when you come looking at,
No,
at any of the AI.
I agree. I know this much of.
Well, and hearkening back to the whole cybersecurity, you know, we all didn't know a whole lot about that at the beginning. And by just sort of coming forward and beginning to share with one another, we began to develop the kind of knowledge we needed for the schools. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you
Awesome.
for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Yes.
All
This has been
right,
fantastic.
great. And I would encourage everyone to join us for our next webinar. Next week, we have our first book conversation with Atlas Reads, and we hope everybody will join us there too. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks.